All right, let's dive deep into something we all kind of rely on, but rarely actually think about: food hygiene. I'm Jay, and I'll be guiding you through all this culinary adventure.
And I'm Scarlet, pleased to be here. Food safety is my area, so looking forward to getting into this.
You know, Scarlet, whenever I'm grabbing a takeaway or even just, sneaking a peek into a restaurant kitchen, I always wonder about those really strict hygiene rules they have. Well, lucky for us, we've got personal hygiene and catering as our roadmap today. So we're going to uncover the secrets of those spotless kitchens and find out why chefs are so meticulous about everything.
It's pretty fascinating, isn't it? It's not just like ticking boxes or following rules. It's about protecting public health, which is a big deal.
Yeah, it is. And our source really drives that point home, It says food handlers are legally obligated to keep up high standards of personal cleanliness, wear specific clothing, even report if they're ill. It's not a suggestion, it's the law.
Exactly, and for good reason. Foodborne illnesses can be so serious, even life-threatening in some cases. These rules really help reduce the risk of outbreaks and protect us, the people eating the food.
Makes you realize the weight on these food industry workers' shoulders, doesn't it? It's not just about cooking tasty food, but ensuring every step's taken care of, from raw ingredients to the final plate.
Absolutely. That's why training is so important. Our source stresses the need for induction training, when you start, and then continuous learning and refresher courses. Make sure everyone handling food is up to date and putting that knowledge into practice.
So it's like a constant upskilling, staying in the loop. Okay, let's talk hand washing. Everyone knows it's essential, but our source gets into the nitty-gritty of when and how.
Yeah, and it is more involved than you might think.
Think about it. Throughout the day, we're touching countless surfaces. Door handles, phones, even those shopping trolleys at the supermarket. Who knows what's lurking on those?
It's true. Every interaction is a potential contamination point.
And our source lists tons of situations where hand washing is non-negotiable. Some obvious, like raw food, but others, a bit surprising.
Like after handling a delivery box, for instance.
Yeah, exactly. It's about breaking that chain of contamination, isn't it?
Right. Imagine handling raw chicken loaded with bacteria, and then you touch a utensil or a plate without washing your hands. You could be transferring those bacteria to a salad, a cooked dish. It's a recipe for disaster.
Speaking of recipes, the hand washing technique itself is more involved than your average quick rinse. Our source goes as far as recommending a nail brush.
Yep, a thorough scrub.
Getting under those fingernails, targeting fingertips. It's a whole process.
And just as important, drying your hands properly. Damp hands are a haven for bacteria. Those microscopic critters like E. coli, they love warm, moist environments. Damp hands are like a luxury spa for them. The source recommends paper towels, drying thoroughly, and even using the towel to turn off the tap and open the door. It's all about minimizing contact with surfaces that might be contaminated.
Talk about attention to detail, which leads us nicely to protective clothing. The source mentions specific attire for food handlers, and it's not just about looking the part.
It's like an extra layer of protection, a barrier between you and the food.
Right, preventing contamination from our clothes or bodies getting into what we're preparing.
Exactly. And the design is all about hygiene. No buttons, for example, no external pockets, anything that could harbor those pesky bacteria.
And those chef hats aren't just a fashion statement, are they? They're stopping stray hairs from ending up in someone's dinner.
Exactly. Head coverings are essential. And yeah, beards, long hair, it all needs to be properly contained.
Oh, gloves. You'd think they'd be the ultimate solution, wouldn't you? Slap them on and you're good to go.
Not so fast. Our source sets the record straight. Gloves, they're not a substitute for hand washing.
Really?
Yeah, they can get contaminated just like hands. Need regular replacing, especially after breaks or whenever you enter a food prep area.
So you're saying if I touch raw chicken with gloves on, then scratch my nose and touch a salad, those gloves are basically useless.
Pretty much. Gloves provide a barrier, yes, but only if they're used properly. Changing them often is key, and hand washing remains crucial. Always.
So an extra layer of protection, not a replacement for the basics. Got it. Now, what about when a food handler is feeling a bit under the weather? Just power through.
Definitely not. Our source is really clear on this one. Reporting illness, knowing when to stay away from food prep, absolutely paramount.
It's not just about feeling a bit sniffly, is it? Certain conditions are a big no-no when it comes to food.
Right. Some things just pose too much of a contamination risk.
And there's a true or false quiz in our source. Helps identify situations where reporting illness and staying home is non-negotiable. Covers things like having a cut, experience, diarrhea and vomiting, or even having a sick family member.
Yeah, those are all situations where it's best to err on the side of caution.
So it's about taking responsibility, isn't it? Not just for yourself, but everyone who might eat the food you're handling.
Absolutely. And there's that 48-hour rule, returning to work after, diarrhea and vomiting. Important stuff.
Right. Let's put all this knowledge to the test. Our source gives us a real-life kitchen scenario and challenges us to spot potential hygiene hazards. Imagine you're walking through a busy kitchen. What catches your eye?
Well, I definitely notice a chef with a bandage on his finger, someone touching their hair while prepping food, and a bin overflowing with rubbish. Bit of a hazard minefield.
You've got a keen eye. And for each hazard, the source provides these practical control measures. Washing hands after touching hair, proper dressings for cuts, making sure waste is disposed of correctly. It's all about being proactive.
Yeah, creating that culture of safety and responsibility in the kitchen.
We've covered loads in this deep dive, and this is just the beginning.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the, fascinating world of food hygiene.
It's funny, isn't it, how much we just take for granted when it comes to food safety?
It is, and our source really hammers home that importance of understanding the why. Why do we do all these things?
Right, not just going through the motions.
Exactly. It's about appreciating that unseen world of microorganisms and just how easily they can spread.
Like a tiny army of troublemakers lurking everywhere.
Exactly. And take hand washing. We talked about when to wash your hands, but why is it so crucial? Well, our source explains it removes those microorganisms that could contaminate food.
So it's not just about seeing the dirt and washing it off. It's about targeting these invisible things that can make us ill.
Precisely. It's like waging war on an unseen enemy.
And that enemy is everywhere, right? Think about all the surfaces we touch, door handles, your mobile, cash. You pick up bacteria from all sorts of places. And if you don't wash your hands properly before handling food, you're basically inviting those contaminants to dinner.
It's a bit unsettling when you think about it, all those potential points of contamination.
No wonder hand washing is considered the cornerstone of food hygiene.
Couldn't agree more. And it's not just about washing them, it's washing them effectively. Remember that step-by-step guide with the nail brush? It's not just for show. It's about getting into all those little nooks and crannies where bacteria love to hide.
And don't forget drying those hands thoroughly with paper towels. Our source is quite specific about that.
Oh, absolutely. Damp hands are basically a breeding ground for bacteria.
They need to be bone dry before touching any food or equipment.
Right. And something else we shouldn't overlook is proper hand washing facilities. Our source actually mentions the legal requirements for wash basins, in food prep areas.
So there are specific rules for the sinks themselves.
Yeah, they need to be easily accessible, have hot and cold running water, be stocked with soap and hygienic drying facilities. It's all there in the regulations.
So it's not just about individual practices, it's the right infrastructure too.
It's about that culture of hygiene, where everyone understands these practices and feels empowered to maintain them.
Right, like it's built into the system.
Exactly. And speaking of creating a culture, let's move on to protective clothing. We've touched on how it acts as a barrier, but our source goes into some interesting details about the design and purpose of these garments. No buttons, no external pockets. It's all very deliberate, isn't it?
It's like those clothes have a secret mission to keep our food safe.
Well, think about it. Buttons and pockets, they can trap food particles and bacteria, making them a nightmare to clean effectively.
Right, so it's harder to get rid of everything.
Exactly. By eliminating those features, the clothing becomes much easier to clean and maintain, reducing the risk of cross-contamination.
Clever. And those chef hats, the hair nets, even beard snoods. They're not just a fashion statement, are they?
Not at all. It's all about minimizing the risk of anything, even hair, ending up in the food. It's all got a purpose.
Makes you appreciate the thought that goes into all this.
And it's not just about the design of the clothing, it's about how it's worn and maintained. Protective clothing needs to be clean and in good repair, worn only in the food prep area, changed regularly to prevent that buildup of contaminants.
Okay, so we've got hand washing, protective clothing, even touched on gloves. But what happens when a food handler is feeling a bit, under the weather? Is it okay to just push through and keep working?
Absolutely not. Our source is super clear on this. Reporting illness and knowing when to stay away from food prep is, crucial.
Right. It's not just about soldiering on.
No. It's about recognizing you could be putting others at risk.
So there's a line. You have to know when to step back.
Exactly. Foodborne illnesses can spread so quickly and have serious consequences, especially for vulnerable individuals like the elderly or those with weakened immune systems.
So it's not just about you and how you feel. It's about everyone around you.
Precisely. Reporting illness, staying home when you're sick, it's actually a responsible thing to do.
It's putting everyone's health first.
Exactly. It's about prioritizing health and safety of, well, everyone involved in the food chain. Our source even includes a true or false quiz, helps identify those situations where it's absolutely necessary to report illness and stay away from food prep.
Oh, that sounds interesting. What kind of situations does it cover?
It covers everything from having a cut that's infected to experiencing diarrhea and vomiting, even having a family member who's ill. It's a really handy tool. Helps make sure everyone's following best practices.
Right, so it's not just about how you feel, it's about specific circumstances.
Exactly. And what about that 48-hour rule we discussed?
Yeah.
You know, returning to work after, well, diarrhea and vomiting.
Yeah, why 48 hours specifically?
It's crucial to ensure you're no longer contagious. You don't want to put others at risk.
Right, gotta break that chain of infection.
Exactly, and prevent those outbreaks.
This deep dive is really highlighting how much goes into keeping our food safe.
It's a multi-layered system relying on individual responsibility and that collective awareness of the risks.
It's a team effort, isn't it?
Very much so. Now, remember that kitchen scenario we looked at earlier? The chef with the bandage, overflowing bin, the person touching their hair?
Yeah, it's like a spot the hazard game.
Well, our source doesn't just leave us hanging with that list of hazards. It provides practical control measures for each one. It's like a handy guide to keep those kitchen gremlins at bay.
So solutions for each problem.
Exactly. It's problem solving in action. Identify the hazard, come up with a solution to mitigate the risk. For example, that chef with the bandage. The control measure is making sure they're wearing a brightly colored, waterproof dressing.
Right, so it's not just any old bandage.
Nope. It's a specific type designed to keep things hygienic. And someone touching their hair while prepping food? Simple. Wash their hands immediately and thoroughly. Be vigilant. Take those proactive steps to prevent contamination.
What about that overflowing bin? I imagine that's a magnet for all sorts of unwanted visitors.
You're right. Overflowing bins attract pests and create those unsanitary conditions. Emptying bins regularly, keeping the area clean and tidy, crucial. Good hygiene isn't just about personal cleanliness, it's that clean and organized environment.
So it's all connected.
Exactly. It all comes together. Food hygiene, it's a holistic approach. Personal hygiene, environmental controls, it's about creating a system that minimizes that risk of contamination at every stage.
Minimizing risk at every stage. Makes sense.
And it needs constant vigilance, attention to detail. Food handlers need to be aware of the risks, understand the importance of these practices, and be empowered to speak up if they see something that's not quite right.
It's like everyone has a role to play in this food safety drama.
Absolutely. It's a team effort. Everyone involved in the food chain, from the farmers to the chefs, even us, the consumers, we all have a role to play in maintaining these standards.
And the rewards are worth it, right?
Oh, totally. Safe food is delicious food. Following these practices means we can all enjoy the pleasure of eating without worrying about the risks.
Well said. You've given us lots to think about today. Ready to wrap things up. Back again, listeners. And as we wrap up this exploration of hygiene and catering, I have to say, I'm feeling pretty enlightened.
It's been a fascinating journey, hasn't it? Food hygiene, it's something I'm really passionate about. Hopefully our listeners are going away with a new appreciation for all the, well, unseen efforts that go into keeping our food safe.
We've covered a lot, that's for sure. From the legal side and training to the real details of hand washing and gloves, even when to report if you're ill. But what stands out to me is this idea of food hygiene as a whole system. You know, it's not just doing individual things right. It's about creating that culture of safety.
It's about vigilance at every level.
Exactly.
And what's so interesting is how all those seemingly small details, they all contribute to the bigger picture. Take protective clothing, for example. We talked about no buttons, no external pockets. It's not just some random rule. It's all about minimizing those hiding places for bacteria.
Right, taking away those sneaky spots.
Exactly, and those bright waterproof dressings, it's not just for show, it's like a visual alarm, you know?
A warning sign.
Yeah, letting everyone know there's a potential contamination risk, prompting that extra caution. It's a system of checks and balances.
Each element playing its part.
Precisely, and if we connect that to the bigger picture, it shows that food hygiene isn't just the responsibility of the person handling the food, it's everyone involved.
Suppliers, managers, even us, the consumers.
Exactly. It's a shared responsibility. It's like this intricate web with everyone playing a part in keeping food safe.
And I think our deep dive today has really, shone a light on that web.
It has. So as we reflect on everything we've learned, what stands out to you?
You know, it's how much of food hygiene comes down to being mindful, being present in the moment, aware of the risks, and taking those steps to minimize them.
Treating every interaction with food with respect.
From raw ingredients to the final dish.
And with responsibility.
Right, responsibility not just for ourselves, but for everyone who eats the food we handle.
It's a powerful concept.
It is. It's not just about following rules blindly. It's about cultivating that mindset of awareness.
And responsibility.
And that brings us to a question for our listeners. How can you apply this knowledge in your own lives, even if you're not working in a kitchen?
Maybe it's being more aware of your own hand washing at home.
Or noticing hygiene practices when you're eating out?
Perhaps it's even having a chat with your kids about food safety.
Or taking a moment to appreciate the people working hard to keep our food safe.
Every little action, every bit of awareness contributes to a safer, healthier food system for all of us.
So next time you see a chef carefully washing their hands, or notice that sign reminding you to wash your hands,
remember that world of microorganisms we can't see and all those actions being taken to protect you.
Because food hygiene, it's not just about rules, it's about respect, responsibility.
And a commitment to keeping food safe and enjoyable.
Well said. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into personal hygiene and catering. Hope you found it interesting, maybe even inspiring. Remember, food safety, it's everyone's business. Let's work together to create a food system that keeps us all nourished and protected. Until next time, happy eating, everyone.